Thank you very much, Jim Rogers, chairman of Rogers Holdings and Beeland Interests, and you were a co-founder of the Quantum Fund. You're a noted China fan and a big bull on China. Are you worried about the instability caused by the Bo Xilai scandal?
I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about everything. Whenever I'm an investor, yes. That if you ask me, I'm sure that in 5 years we'll look back and have forgotten all about it. There are other things that one can worry about in China. That doesn't worry me.
So if that doesn't worry you in China, and this is the biggest turmoil they've seen socially, we're being told, since 1989, which was a big event. It was the Tiananmen Square massacre and uprising. What does worry you about China?
Well, I mean, they've been trying to cool the economy off for 3 years now. They've been trying to pop a real estate bubble. They seem to be successful at it. It may get out of control and spread to too many other parts of the economy. I'm worried about that. I'm worried about inflation in China. I'm worried about the fact that the currency is not convertible yet, and it should be. Plenty of things to worry about.
Are you worried that slowing growth in China is going to cause more unrest with the population there, because the population has grown to expect a certain level of growth and a certain increase in their standard of living, and if they don't get that and the government isn't legitimate because it's not democratically elected, do we see a bigger uprising and real turmoil?
You're already seeing demonstrations in China, thousands of them every year, which they acknowledge, and that's been going on even during good times. But Simon, I'm more worried about those kind of problems in the U.S. and Europe. This is where the social unrest is going to be worse. Europe is where it's going to be worse.
We don't have thousands of protests like they do in China every year. You think it's going to be worse here and in Europe?
I would suspect that when economic conditions get worse here and get worse in Europe, we're going to see, you've seen governments fail in Europe, you've seen countries fail in Europe. I suspect you're going to see more of it,
so
yes.
When we saw pictures in Greece of sort of fire bombings and sort of stones being thrown at the police and running battles, do you expect to see that here in the US, maybe down here in New York City?
We saw it in London, we've seen it in several countries in Europe in the last year or two. Yes, I expect to see it here too. If you don't, then you should look out the window.
Okay. Well, earlier today, we had Ben Bernanke talking at his press conference about the Fed's decision to hold interest rates where they are. He said something about inflation. Here's what he said.
The concern we have is that if inflation were to run well above 2% for a protracted period, that the credibility and the well-anchored inflation expectations, which are such a valuable asset of the Federal Reserve, might become eroded.
And that was Ben Bernanke from earlier today. So, credibility and the Fed, I mean, it might become eroded. Do you hold the Fed much credibility in high regard, perhaps?
Mr. Bernanke has zero credibility as far as I'm concerned. The Federal Reserve has zero credibility. Simon, go back and look at everything Mr. Bernanke has said in the last 7 or 8 years he's been in Washington. He has never been right about anything. Man has zero credibility for anybody who would take the time to look at his history.
So what do you worry about, particularly with inflation? Do you think inflation here in the U.S. is going to get out of control? Do you think the Fed will be unable to control it and keep it under wraps?
Absolutely. They've been printing staggering amounts of money. They've taken staggering amounts of debt onto their balance sheet. Much of it is garbage. The federal government is spending huge amounts of money they don't have. We have inflation in the U.S. It's going to get worse, Simon.
It's going to get worse. And how are you investing based on that particular situation? And then let's bring back China. I mean, how do you think that's going to affect your investing outlook? I mean, where are you putting your money?
I mainly own raw materials, natural resources, because in times of inflation, well, let's put it this way, if the economy gets better, there are going to be shortages of those raw materials and I'm going to make money. If the economy doesn't get better, Simon, then they're going to print a lot more money. Mr. Bernanke doesn't know anything else to do except print money. And throughout history, when governments have debased the currency, you protect yourself by owning real assets, whether it's silver or rice or whatever it happens to be.
So what about two big ones that a lot of people look at, oil and gold? Are you bullish on those two?
I own both of them. I would expect gold. Gold has been up 11 years in a row, which is extremely unusual for any asset. It is consolidating. It wouldn't surprise me if it continued to consolidate. If it goes down a lot more, I hope I buy a lot more. I'm not selling my gold by any stretch of the imagination. The surprise with oil is going to be how high it stays and how high it goes. Simon, the International Energy Agency has done a study. The world's known reserves of oil are in steady decline. We have to find a lot of oil, or the price of oil is going to go to unheard of heights.
There's oil, that's true though, but we have natural gas in vast quantities here in the US, and it's getting lower and lower every time I look at the price of natural gas. Cars can be converted to that. There could be a lot more. Maybe oil's a thing of the past. I mean, does that worry? I mean, does that worry you on that front?
Everything you just said is true someday, and maybe cars will run on who knows what someday. Yes, all of that's going to happen, and yes, the bull market in gold and oil and commodities will end someday. But someday is still a long way away.
Okay. About the coming election, who do you see as the most viable candidate to fix America's problems that you have talked about in the past, which is massive indebtedness and things like that?
Neither of the two, who seem to be
thumbs down to both.
Yeah, they're both the same. There's no. What's the difference in Obama and what's his name, Romney? Except that one's from Boston and one's from Chicago.
You see absolutely no difference between
essentially no difference. No, it's the same old thing. The Republicans and Democrats for decades have had the same old thing for the most. Simon, a pox on both of their houses. They're the ones who got us
on both of their houses.
A pox on both of their houses. They're the ones who got us into this situation. When I was a child, America was the largest creditor nation in the world. Now we're the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. Yes, a pox on both of their houses.
Well, we'll leave it there. Jim Rogers, famed investor, saying a pox on both the houses of Mitt Romney and Barack Obama.